Hey everyone, and welcome to DnD Horror Stories with DnD Doge. Sometimes, people can really get into their Dungeons & Dragons characters, and it's all in good fun. But sometimes, there's something lurking beneath the surface of it that it becomes disturbing and cringe. To the post. Problem player sneaks child roleplay fetish into game. By Reddit user CoupleOdd2287. This begins sometime in 2020. We were all brand new to D&D and started a homebrew game together. We were a paladin, me, a barbarian, a different paladin, a rogue, a player I can't recall the class of, and, at first, a druid, our subject of the story. We'll call them Alex. Their first character was a druid, and we all loved them. They had a childlike personality and naivety to them that fit. They were an awakened animal that was bipedal. That character retired partway through the campaign by going to magic school. Their next character is where the major issues began. The child elf ranger, about 16 years old, but a baby in an elf's time span. This player had a slew of problematic behaviors. Main character syndrome, wanting a ridiculous amount of items they found on the internet, and created a collaged list in order to ask the DM to give them. Trying to befriend and talk to clear villains during active combat. Cheating dice rolls. Outside of game, they would leave trash behind at other hosts' home, even though we always cleaned up at their place. And trash talking the other hosts for having dishes in the sink. It's a lot, I know. But these were here and there things, over the course of years, that we did talk to them about, and they mostly fixed their behaviors accordingly. The problems that were character-specific and persisted included the bad guy friendship quest, reacting to situations in an unbelievable immersion-breaking way, and inconsistency in character personality. Allow me to explain. They played their character as childlike and naive most of the time, same as the first character, but whenever it would suit them or allow them to pull some of the spotlight onto themselves, primarily when dealing with children NPCs, they were suddenly mature and had knowledge that would help out the kid, and acted like an adult figure that the kid could rely upon. Once this was done by, and I'm not joking, bringing in knowledge of menstruation and telling other player characters to buy pads for the girl, even though that had absolutely nothing to do with what was happening. The girl was just adopted by the group after some of the players killed her alcoholic and neglected father. The huge red flag that waved in front of us while covered in blazing red flames was when we were in a prison after this player helped get us captured. They were not the sole reason, as another player didn't tell us that they had a country hunting them down, and we were in the area. Though while in prison, we eventually came up with an escape plan. This player decided to help out and kick things off. They would make a distraction. Though we were stunned when they described their underage character beginning to strip on a table for all to see. The dungeon master, absolutely surprised, described how she began stripping. Then, before she could take anything off, the guards, shocked and horrified, stopped her and kept her from continuing. We escaped the prison, but this was the moment that we questioned Alex's intentions. Later, they got the character killed by running ahead in the dungeon by 2 floors, and were wiped out by elementals. A stipulation was set in place for all their future characters. No underage characters. We still played with them because we thought this incident may have been brought on by childhood trauma that they mentioned in the past. We were all high school friends before starting D&D, so we just told them never again, and that it wasn't okay. So Alex makes another character that is 18, begrudgingly, but still plays them the same. Something important to know. Our dungeon master, the amazing overachiever, created unique abilities for each player character that we would get at certain key levels. He tried to get Alex to talk with him for ideas and collaborate unique skills, though they kept brushing him off. He came up with a wonderful idea to incorporate the character's prosthetic in a Sekiro Shinobi prosthetic way. It could be switched out with different parts for different purposes. Though the session after the DM created this, the player would intentionally kill off their character after they were told no about getting one of those items from their collage list. They literally fed themselves to giant 20-foot tall wolves in a giant forest, ignoring all of the Dungeon Master's warnings. This was like 5 minutes of back and forth warnings and roleplay of the character trying to play with the aggressive wolves, until, well, crunch. The Dungeon Master lost it. Hours of work down the drain, all because of a, "No, you can't have that." Then another rule, specific for Alex alone, was made. If you purposely kill off your character again, whether through many poor decisions or ignoring warnings, that's it. They would have no more characters. And this time they listened. Their next character was some random druid that the group had no connection with and picked up off the side of the road. We somehow needed to add the player this deep in the campaign during an intense arc. Though the game has gone on hiatus for over a year now, as me and the Dungeon Master have had a baby, and the Dungeon Master is currently coming up with the final few sessions. These sessions will save or destroy the world, depending on the player's success against a god-killing entity. The event that revealed Alex's actions were likely not the result of trauma, but fetish, as one night, when we were at their house for a game, they revealed the disturbing truth. Dungeon Master and I were pregnant at this time. After the session, while cleaning, one of us saw a container full of pacifiers. They asked about it, and Alex said, without hesitation, that they were a little. Someone else asked what that was, and they explained that they enjoy pretending to be a child while with their partner. The horror and discomfort made the room feel stifling. We all hurried to leave after that. We have played a session or two since then, though I voiced my grievances about Alex very vocally after that day. And since so much time has passed, along with their character being irrelevant with having no stakes and only 2 players, sometimes 3, remaining, we decided to just not invite them back when the game starts up again. This was our first real campaign, and it has given us one hell of a horror story. TLDR, problem player has many issues, makes their child elf character strip in a prison as a distraction, roleplays their multiple characters as childlike, if not just an actual child, kills multiple of their characters off when not getting their way, and finally reveals, at the end, that they enjoy role-playing with their partner as a child. Wow, now that certainly was something. Now look, I'm of the mind that what 2 consenting adults do in the privacy of their own home is whatever. I'm not gonna yuck someone's yum, as the kids say these days. But if the group didn't invite this player back just because of that, I think that would be kind of dickish. Though I can understand people having boundaries on stuff like that as well. The main issue here is that the group discovered why this player would always roleplay a child or childlike character, and it was basically them bringing their kink into the game. Not to mention all the other problems, like cheating, the intentional killing off of their character just because they didn't get their way as a temper tantrum, which, looking back on that part now, makes sense. And just the general vibe that this player gave while playing. But like I said, this player used their D&D game as a vessel to roleplay their childlike fantasies. And anyone doing that with any fetish, whether it be feet or voyeurism, is not a good thing to do. Anyways, I can understand OP and the DM not wanting this player in their game anymore. But with that said, I feel we could use a kitty to cleanse our brain palates after that story. So here's Nipsey being Nipsey. He's just so chill. So I hope that you will be chill and like the video and subscribe, as we are getting really close to 32K. Also, as always, if you would like to help out directly, I'll leave the Ko-Fi and Ko-fi links in the description. So with that, I think we are ready for some more D&D horror stories. So let's get right into this next one, about a player that has trouble accepting help during character creation, to the point that they just don't play. To the post. It's my character, I'm making it my way. Butt out. By Reddit user Goblobber. This is the response I got from a new player when I asked them if they needed any help with character creation. They'd been recommended by a close friend of mine who warned me that new player could be a little high-strung, but I was promised that they would vibe with me and the group. Spoiler, they did not. This is all online, so I reach out on Discord, give them the basics of the setting, and tell them that we are playing Savage Worlds. New player admits that they are a bit worried about this, that they've only played D&D before and never tried a different system, that they were concerned about learning a new one. That was fair enough. They asked me if creating a character is the same as in D&D, and it isn't really. There's different considerations in any new rule set. New player complains that they don't want to have to learn a whole new character creation system in such a short time frame, even though the game was due to start a month later. I figured, yeah, okay, I can help with that. I said, if you can tell me your concept, I can put you to some edges and hindrances that might be suitable. Though she said, it's my character, I'm making it my way, butt out. So I left it at that. 2 weeks go by, and I check in with the group. How are people doing for characters? Everyone says what they are thinking. We clarify some rule stuff, and it's all looking good. Though, new player is silent. So I ask, new player, how's the character coming along? New player says, it's not. Character creation is too complicated. I don't understand it. I suggest, well, maybe the player who invited them to the game in the first place can talk it through with you. And she says, no, I don't want anyone interfering with my character. I figured, okay, leave it at that. So 3 days before the game, I still haven't heard anything from new player. I nervously message them and say, have you got a character ready for me? I'm finalizing world building, and I need to know if there's any NPCs or events I should be considering. She says, no, it's ready when it's ready. I figured, fine. The first session comes around. Players introduce themselves, and the setting is established. Then it comes to new players' turn to introduce themselves. I don't have a character. Character creation is too hard, and no one was helping me. TLDR. I don't know why she didn't just join a 5th edition game instead. Edit. They stuck around for 3 sessions before leaving. Part of their complaint, aside from no one helping them understand the rules that she refused to have explained, was that I didn't include any of her character's elements in the story, when I'd clearly gone through so much effort for everyone else. At this stage, she had still not rendered me any backstory, and any suggestions I did make were vetoed. Well, what the heck was she expecting? She wanted to make a character that was, I guess, mysterious, but just couldn't get her head wrapped around how to make characters in that system. You would think that after a week of trying to make a character, and not understanding the system, that she would want some help, but yet she still refused. Then she accuses everyone of not helping her? Well, all I can say here is that you can't fix stupid, and with her leaving eventually, the game was likely better for it. Let's move on to the next D&D horror story, where a player claims to have lots of experience with D&D, only for the Dungeon Master to find out that claim was dubious at best. To the post. Quote-unquote experienced player missed a slam dunk and got confrontational. By Reddit user Duoplex19. I was running a Dungeons & Dragons game with 4 players, and word got out around my campus that I was running this game. I eventually got a message from some dude who I had heard of but hadn't met. He seemed pretty level-headed in the texts and assured me that he has a lot of experience. We'll get back to that later. So he and I get to working out a character, and he made a human fighter. Instead of making a backstory, he said he would help me out by just molding his character to be whatever I needed for the moment, then working on developing his backstory and stuff later. Since this all happened very shortly before the session, I figured that would be fine. So I had him be a separate contracted mercenary working for the group which hired the party, but gave him some moderate information which would help the party out. This was in an effort to give him a chance to be helpful to the party, and for them to accept his companionship. Skip forward to session time, and he shows up early. At first, I'm happy, of course. Showing up early is a good sign. But as I start talking to him, I start realizing I should have gotten to know this guy a little better before letting him get to this point. To put it gently, I feel that his conversation skills could use some development, mostly in the department of humor and saying relevant things. But I was awkward like that too once, and I would have been heartbroken to have been kicked out just for my personality if I were in his shoes. So I give him a chance. The other players show up, we get started, and the party goes to a tavern to gather some information from some of the informants they were tipped off on. They talk to a few characters, and all is going well, but I keep checking in with the new player to see what he does. We'll start calling him C for the sake of writing. C decides that his best course of action is to just stand still with his arms crossed. So I make a point of drawing the party's attention to his character, and use that as his time to describe his character. The party bites, and goes to ask him if he knows anything about the people they were after. His response was, I don't know, and just a shrug. The party looks at each other and promptly goes, okay, on to the next, and just leaves him standing there. At this point, I intervene and say something along the lines of, your heart's love for adventure simply can't contain itself when you blurt out, I know where they gather and what time. I hate taking agency away from players, but I absolutely had to this time. Well, they go back to talking to him, and now he acts all backed into a corner and starts getting defensive for no reason, when they earnestly just asked him what else he knows. No one accused him of anything, but he acted as if they did. Now they're suspicious that he works for the enemy. He's still being cagey about the information, at which point, one of the player characters goes, well, if you aren't going to cooperate with us, and you know about these bad guys, then we have no choice but to believe that you're affiliated with them. At which point, he says, how do you know I'm not? Facepalm. Like, I literally facepalmed. The group he was hired by is a good faction, not the ones the party is chasing. I made that very clear to him before we started, gave him names of the groups and everything, and even wrote them on his character sheet. They then decide to fight him, and he, above table, starts genuinely arguing with that same player. It almost turned into a real-life fight, until I just said, okay, and so we skipped to the combat, and assume that you all figured out the location, and that this guy has valuable fighting skills. This was in an attempt to end the session early, without making it a complete waste of time. He wins initiative, and most of the monsters go right after him, if not all. The party, of course, is coming in after that. As the combat starts, he's boasting above table about how well he knows the optimal strategies. He's taking on the tone of an experienced player, helping out new players. He runs straight into the group of enemies alone, and uses his action surge to kill one of the minions, instead of the bigger guy in charge of them. He then proceeds to get downed within the next 2 turns. He didn't die, but the party was pretty well like, yeah right, good fighting skills. Trust me when I say he had no tactics whatsoever. Anyways, I ended the session after that fight for a total time of maybe 2 hours or so. Everyone packed up and left, But I talked to C and asked, "Dude, what was that?" And he said, "I know, right? That guy seemed like he was actually gonna fight me." It seemed he missed a decent amount of the point. It also turned out that his experience was 8 months of watching Critical Role. I dropped the conversation there and just texted him later on not to show up to the next session. Lesson learned: get to know players just a little bit better before having them join in the middle of a campaign. Maybe I wasn't perfect either, but man, that was rough. TLDR: player joined my campaign, was given semi-important info that would help the party, though gave none of it, acted suspicious, got confrontational, almost got into a real-life fistfight with the other players, and fantastically disproved his brazen claims of being more experienced. Well, sure, this player did kinda lie when he said that he had experience playing D&D when OP let him come into the game, and that experience turned out to just be watching Critical Role for 8 months. But I think OP was a bit rough on the dude. To me, it just sounded like the player was a little socially awkward and just needed a little more guidance in what to do when playing the game. Sure, OP gave this player notes about what info he would have had, and the player should have used that to roleplay towards the other players. But when he didn't, perhaps OP should have gently reminded him, above table, to use the information that was provided to him. I don't know. I just get the feeling that there were multiple factors in this session going down the way it did. I mean, in the end, it was the player's fault for acting the way he did, and OP did do what they could to avoid PvP between the players by just fast-forwarding to the planned combat that OP had. But ultimately, OP felt that the player wasn't a good fit, and politely told them to not come back. I don't really have much more to say on this one, so let's move on to the final story of the day, where a dungeon master just can't seem to keep her games going. To the post. Why you should never make a campaign based on your special interest. By Reddit user Balloon Fight Addicted. So, I'm in this online D&D group that's been going on well over 4 years. We each take turns DMing short campaigns, around 12 to 24 sessions, that usually have a good chance of getting completed unless the DM reaches an absolute roadblock, which has happened only twice, except for the main character of the story. But one player in particular gets into particular roadblocks, not because of external situations or scheduling conflicts, but because they lose interest in almost everything they make after 5 to 6 sessions. Let's call her Shannon. Shannon is a good player, a really great one. The backstory and beats with her tabaxi still make me tear up slightly to this day. She also is on the autism spectrum. After we completed our last campaign, Shannon suggested that we should play a homebrew campaign based on Castlevania that she was making. That sounded really cool, as I wrote up a Christian gunslinger, as she gave us all detailed lore and multiple fanon articles to read. I even watched the anime to get a better grasp on the world. The first arc went great. We completed a mega dungeon and killed a vampire lord, which got us lots of gold to use in the shopping session that had hooks to the next mega dungeon. We talk a lot in between sessions on voice calls, and she wouldn't stop talking about Castlevania. However, a few days before the next session, we were chilling in the voice chat asking her and sharing our excitement for the next session. However, she sighed and gave general answers. When we asked what was wrong, she said she didn't quite feel like running it anymore, but didn't go into why. We had sympathy, as maybe it's due to in-real-life stuff, so we just let it pass. After all, we had one good adventure that's satisfying enough for me. 2 weeks later, she came to us with another campaign based on Helldivers 2, and started gushing about the 1984 themes. Now, I wasn't part of this campaign, as she was pretty adamant on using 5th edition with an F-ton of homebrew rolls for guns and whatnot, which isn't my style. But from what I've heard, It's a similar story from earlier. There was even a funny story about her canceling a session because of a new update, and she needed, quote, inspiration. But instead of saying something in the voice chat, she pinged the server, announcing it ending due to losing interest. We played a campaign from another person for the next 8 weeks, which started and ended phenomenally, by the way, before she announced she had a really good campaign idea based on One Piece. Yes, it was 2023, when everyone was obsessed with One Piece. Personally, everyone was ecstatic, as we've all wanted a more nautical-based campaign for a while. I quickly drafted up a swashbuckler rogue, with a fondness for knives and collecting them, my goal being finding the twin silver knives I've heard in Laganda to save my lichen-infested island. The world wasn't exactly set in the world of One Piece. It was One Piece mixed with traditional D&D fantasy tropes. But regardless, that just made the world feel better and fit into the system better. We played for about 8 months, for about 16 sessions, with 6 sessions remaining apparently, before we took a 1-month break, as some of us had scheduled family vacations at conflicting times. During that, we talked on voice chat, and she wouldn't stop talking about the newest chapter in One Piece, or the new live action, etc. When we got back and started to prep for the final arc, it happened again. We were talking on voice chat, and she was just kind of avoiding talking about the campaign. I think most of us knew what was about to happen, but we all asked her what was wrong, and she revealed she lost interest in One Piece, so she's ending the campaign. While we understood, we were almost there and felt really blueballed. Not to mention this sort of thing happened in her past campaigns. We had an honest discussion that, while we're not going to force her to continue a campaign, we noticed that whenever she makes a campaign, she loses interests when it's about her special interest, as it seems like all her special interests have a lifetime of around 3 to 6 months. She got really defensive, saying, "It's not my fault for losing interest in stuff," and didn't understand what our concerns were and how canceling good campaigns kinda bummed us out. We eventually put her campaigns on the back burner, as everyone has new ideas that actually work out. Well, I can see how that could get old pretty quickly. Getting really into a themed campaign, only for the DM to just drop it before it can reach its conclusion. Like getting into a really good show, only for them to cancel it before it would have ended. I'm looking at you, Firefly. Though I suppose we did get Serenity, so at least that had a conclusion. But anyways, I digress. Maybe a good idea would be to maybe just have her run 1 or 2 shot games, based on what her interests are at any given time, in between longer campaigns. Though I'm still trying to wrap my head around how a Helldivers D&D game would work. But yeah, I think that would work out, as she would get to run a game in whatever world she has an interest in at that given moment, and the players won't be left wanting more. I mean, a Castlevania-based D&D game does sound really cool. Also, if you happen to play Helldivers 2, send me a DM on Twitter, and maybe we could party up sometime. But that is all I have for you today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope that your games remain horror story free. Until next time.